Morning, good morning, good morning. Or is it afternoon already?
It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, everybody. I cannot believe a week has gone by already. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is doing well.
Yeah, we're fine.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I was just about to say this is not a recording. I'm happy to hear that. Okay, how did your reading go last week? Anybody had a chance to read anything at all?
I saw it was some of what we started to discuss in class.
Okay, lovely, lovely. No, that's fine, as long as you find some time to do some reading and make some notes as to what things mean. Remember, your midterm exam is in week number 5. That's not too far away, even though it's only week number 2. Before you know it, we'll be into week number 5 and you'll be writing that test. So just make sure you stay on top of your reading and take notes, however you.
Can you advise the format of the exam, please?
The exam is going to be simple definitions, what things mean, and short answers, like make a list of how a board is composed, what are the functions of the board of directors, what is the function of senior management, what are the governance issues surrounding this, that, and the other thing. So very simple. Once you understand definitions like what is a nominating committee and audit committee and other definitions that you need to learn, as well as being able to respond to short answer questions, you'll be fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. However you prepare for your examinations, just go ahead and do that. Some people have memories that are incredible. They just read stuff and remember. Others need to make notes. Others need to make a study list. Others can study the night before for some reason, cram and get through. Others need to prepare early. We all are different. Whatever works for you, make sure you do that. Okay, and I suspect if you do that, you should be fine. All right. Okay. Does anybody know which day the examination is going to be held on? Make sure we're all on the same page.
You said October 15th.
Correct. Saturday, October the 15th at 12:30. Okay, so please make a note of that so that you can be on schedule. All right, so let me just take the register first. Let's see who is here before we begin. Kendra, Kelly.
I'm here.
Kendra, very good. You made it to week number 2. That's good.
Yes, sir.
I know Jeffries is here. She just asked that question about the format for the examination.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Shatoya?
Present.
Okay, wonderful. Shatoya is here. Annalisa.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Annalisa, good afternoon. Sounds like Mona Lisa. Okay, Lucia.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Lucia. Did I pronounce that correctly this time?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. I hope I remember that same one for next week. Okay, Joyanne. Joyanne. 2 in a row. Renee. Okay, I think Renee, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Janisha.
Present.
Hi, Janisha. You're here, present. Yes, very good. Trisella. Trisella? Okay, not with us yet. Gia?
Here.
Hey, Gia, there you are. Wonderful. Gia. Alexandria? Alexandria? Okay, on the way. Is there anybody's name I haven't called?
Deandra?
Okay, Deandra, there you are, 13. Wonderful, Deandra. You survived all that madness, I see.
Finally.
Yes. Persistence is an interesting animal, yes?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, Deandra, can you introduce yourself to your colleagues? You were not here last week.
Sure. My name is Deandra Smith. I've been in the financial industry for over, I would say between 6 to 7 years now. I mainly work with broker dealers. Currently a CFD supervisor for one. And anything else I'm supposed to say?
That sounds good so far. I think folks, yeah, one, oh, and you're doing this course because?
Because I'm getting into the field of the executive team. So I want to have a very comprehensive knowledge as I take on the role.
Excellent, excellent. Then I believe you're in the right place. For those persons who were here last week, they would probably tell you we had an interesting little discourse about in our opening discussions on corporate governance. And we're not going to stop there. We have 2 or 3 more weeks that we'll be talking about corporate governance before your midterm on October the 15th. And then after that, we'll start talking a little bit about accounting and financial implications that are involved in the governance process. Something that for some reason folks don't talk a lot about until something happens. But a whole lot of bad governance occurs on the accounting side in particular, and financial and security side all too often that sometimes we don't really get around to talking about until the next latest scandal. So yeah, we're all in hopefully for some interesting stuff, and hopefully you'll have some little nuggets that you can pick up along the way. By the time we are done, that will help you in whatever governance field you're in. Remember, governance does not only apply to financial institutions. For some reason, some persons are still stuck on that because that's what we talk about a lot in terms of the OECD and the jurisdictional issues around the world with regards to money laundering, terrorist financing, and so on. We think about money laundering and all of its predicate offenses, but governance is not only a financial institutions issue. Good governance is required in any kind of entity. I think we said that last week, and I probably said once or twice before the semester's over more. Right? So if it's a church entity, it still has to have good governance, or else it's not going to do well. It's going to be a subject of scandal like any other entity. If it's a home entity, it still has to have good governance, otherwise it can be subject to pain, suffering, and scandal like any other entity. So this issue of governance is pervasive. All right, basically it's everywhere, and it's required to be conducted a certain way everywhere. And you'll see in our discussions today when we look at the guiding principles, these guiding principles are general principles that are designed to assist persons with governance issues, no matter what entity they're in, and also to give persons an insight on the kinds of things to be thinking about, no matter what environment you might be in from day to day. Next week, depending on how things go today, then we'll look more specifically at governance in the financial institutions as put forth by the Central Bank of the Bahamas, just to give those persons who are in financial services, if they haven't been introduced to it, they'll see kind of what the central bank is looking for, which is a good idea, because if you don't know it already, The central bank is the primary regulator in the Bahamas, along with some other regulators like the Securities Commission, the Compliance Commission, the Insurance Commission, and so on. But the central bank is the principal, or certainly regarded as the principal regulator of all types of financial institutions, credit unions, money exchanges, etc. And so those of you who may not yet be aware of that fact, I hope by the time you're done, you'll see that, and certainly what the central bank requires in terms of governance practices within entities. Of course, all the other regulators have a similar expectation when it comes to good governance, because that is the talk of the day. Okay? And I don't suspect that that is going to go away anytime soon. And for your information, corporate governance is not a new topic. Good governance requirements were expected for centuries, just that folks didn't put a focus on it, perhaps the way we're doing it now, or perhaps they did a little differently, but we always had persons who govern themselves accordingly and those who govern themselves not accordingly. Okay? So here we are, and what we think in a modern society, some people think this is brand new. This is not new. Good behavior has always been expected. Bad behavior has always been persistent. So once again, it's a battle between good and evil. You guys are getting information to help you do the right thing. You'll have to decide which way you are going to go. Okay. All right. I think if you haven't figured it out already, some persons might have figured out which direction I go with regards to governance issues. And perhaps from some of my further comments, you'll confirm in your mind which choice I have made. But we always have to make our own choices as to whether or not we will practice good governance or bad governance. All right. Anybody has any point to make, statement, anything happened in the governance world last week that you want to comment on? Or life was perfect last week, governance-wise?
Mr. Wilkinson,
Hi.
this is not exactly in reference to what happened in the world of governance this week, but I didn't receive the notes, the particular documents we discussed last Saturday that you would share. I didn't receive that email with those.
Okay, I'm coming to that next. So
Okay.
hold that thought. I just wanted to find if anybody had any governance issues they wanted to say something about before we go on, before you forget. No? All right. If you think of anything, please feel free to raise it. Do not be afraid. You don't have to call any names. It's all about exchanging information so that your colleagues perhaps might be a little bit more enlightened about some of the realities without connecting it to any person or entity. Okay, that's the only idea. All right, with regards to Janicia's point, that was my next point, to find out if everybody had received those 3 documents. Apparently not everybody. Janicia, you one of them.
Pardon me?
You didn't
I
receive.
had to step away a second.
You said you didn't receive the 3 documents?
That's correct.
None of the 3.
I didn't receive an email at all. I didn't get any of the documents.
The document?
That's cool. I like it. The documents. So, did you send me your email contact, Janisha?
Yes, I did last Saturday.
Okay, so I'll check it out to see if I had the correct email from Miguel and compare it to your email address. The reason why I said that, because one of the 2 email addresses from BIFS was not correct.
Okay.
And so a student, for example, did not get the link last week because his email address was incorrect. So I'll check yours, Janisha, and I'll send you that information. Question, Janisha. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
When did you discover that you didn't get the document?
It was probably by
I noticed you chuckled.
Wednesday evening.
I noticed you
I
chuckled.
remembered. Hold on, I didn't get that email.
Okay, and then what was the first thing that crossed your mind after that?
Because of that, the time of the evening that was, I said I need to call you the following day. Keep your voice.
And then,
And I didn't.
aha. However, and then that's understandable because crap happens and you get busy. I know all about that. Did the thought of sending an email Janisha?
Pardon?
Did you think that the thought of sending an email?
Would have been an easy fix, right?
Absolutely. Now, let me just say this. I'm not, I'm not, I'm not jumping on Janisha. That's not the idea. I just said it openly because I just want everybody in the class of students to realize that sometimes even simple governance issues get all tangled up because we don't do things when we should, like when we should act on them. And it's certainly something to keep in mind as you go forward. Okay. Um, if you have a governance issue to deal with, first of all, try not to leave it sitting because it's not going to go anywhere. I can assure you, it will not go anywhere. You sit, it will sit. You don't do anything, it will do nothing. That's how issues are. So you have to address them. Okay, for sure. So I'll send you that. I'll send you that information, Janisha. Not a problem. Okay. If you don't get it by tomorrow afternoon, Janisha, now you know what to do. Send me an email and say what?
I'm drafting as we speak.
Way to go. Now you're a quick learner. So I'm sending the email now.
First and last.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So if now what that does is you don't have to remember tomorrow. You're sending it now, and then it
Mhm,
prompts me to act on it sooner if possible.
mhm,
And this is how we solve governance problems in particular and other blah blah blah. Okay. So
mhm.
thank you, Janisha, for throwing that out. You have no idea how many of your colleagues you may have assisted just by making that simple statement. See my
No
point?
problem.
Abs-
Mhm,
That's what I mean. Let's chit chat. That's what this is all about. Yes, we're going to be talking and lecturing and reading and discussing and all that stuff, but throw out stuff. Remember, I told you, it doesn't have to be directly related every single time, but somehow it ends up sometimes being directly or
mhm.
indirectly connected. So, way to go. All right. So, yeah, way to go, Janisha. Okay, so today, hopefully, the other persons have gotten those documents, the guiding principles and the CBOB governance directives. We're going to be talking about those primarily between now and next week. And then week number 4, we'll get into some other miscellaneous and interesting discussions about ethics and compliance and all that stuff. I have 1 or 2 more documents I'm going to send you. I'll probably do that next week so that you will have them in time for week number 4 before your midterm. All right. But certainly by the time we're done this week and next week and the week after that, you will have more than enough blah, 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 to review and to keep you busy on governance issues. And hopefully, by the time we get to the end of it, you'll have some stuff in your repertoire that will help you along the way. All right. So remember, you can interrupt me at any time. You don't need to wait. Now, last week we started talking about we talked about all kinds of other bits and pieces. Then we went into the guiding principles because we talked about the definition, the benefits, etc., of corporate governance. and all that stuff. And that document I sent you on the benefits of corporate governance, uh, of course, your questions will start with that document, then moving down the line. And so when you're doing your review, again, I guess this is a hint, you need to be able to define what corporate governance is, to indicate what a couple of the benefits are, and then all the other bits and pieces that we'll be doing going forward. This stuff is not going to be difficult once you make the application, prepare your study notes, and learn what these little bits and pieces are. Okay, that's the deal. So these guiding principles then, these guiding principles really are just designed to give us an overview of corporate governance. Um, every organization has its own version of how they will apply the governance processes within their organization, but whatever those processes are, these guiding principles, that's why we call them guiding. So whatever the heck you're doing, they should include some version of these things that we're going to be looking at today and next week and the week after, depending on what kind of institution or entity you are in. Okay? So I think we started off last week on the guiding principles by saying very clearly that the board is at the top of this heap, and the board is primarily responsible for proper governance, and the board must come up with the strategies that are necessary in order to build the long-term value that the company needs. Pretty simple. So if I ask the question in the test, who's responsible for guiding corporate governance? The answer is very simple. The board of directors. Simple as that. No sweat. Right? Also, the board is responsible for selecting the company's chief executive officer. The board is responsible for checking on the chief executive officer to make sure that he and his senior management team is running the day-to-day business according to the rules. And what are the rules? Good governance. And we will learn those rules a little by little along the way. But most importantly, you need to know that the board's responsibilities are primarily for those things. One of the other responsibilities that boards have has to do with allocating capital. What does that mean? Taking the financial resources of the company, the thousands, the millions, and the billions of dollars, and putting them in the right place in terms of the operations of that entity and making sure that the money is working for the entity, short, medium, and long term. Not for the pockets of board members and CEOs and senior management, but for the entity itself. And those of you who are on top of your reading of any kind in the financial world, you would have seen that there's a whole lot of hanky-panky going on at the board level, where instead of practicing good governance, these guys and girls are out there practicing bad governance and totally destroying, in some instances, their companies. Okay? So that is something to keep in mind. The other responsibility at the board level has to do with the management of risk. And we're going to talk about risk, I think, throughout this discussion process for the next couple of weeks, because one of the primary responsibilities of the board is to manage risk. And last but not least, the board is responsible for what we call a very popular cliche these days, the tone at the top. Now, not only the tone at the top, because we know tones can be good and bad tones, but the tone at the top for what we call ethical conduct and behavior. Let me ask this class, what do you think the tone of the top means? Anyone? What do we mean by that? They're responsible for the tone at the top.
Setting expectations.
Say it again.
Setting expectations.
Yes, setting expectations, preferably positive ones. Anybody else? Tone at the top for the board. What else should they be doing? Setting expectations, good ones, positive ones. What else? Make a guess. So what if it's not the correct guess? Make a guess anyway. The hell with it. Let it rip.
Demonstrating demonstrating their commitment to integrity and legal compliance.
Absolutely. Demonstrating integrity and adherence to legal compliance. All the things that, when violated, causes companies to suffer reputationally, financially, and sometimes go down the bloody drain. Okay? And again, anybody who's been reading any stuff about financial stuff in the world, a lot of companies have suffered reputational damage and gone down the drain forever, never to return. Okay? So that tone at the top, and that means that whatever board members are doing, they must know that they are being watched by everyone else in the firm and outside the firm. And we're going to talk about those persons in and outside of the firm. And when I say firm, I mean, or entity, not only financial, remember? Any entity that is responsible for governance. If you work for a financial institution, that's you. If you work for a credit union, that's you. If you work for a charity, that's you. If you work for money exchanges, that's you. If you work for a church, that's you. Whatever it is, school, that's you. Government, that's you. The same governance requirements apply. Okay? And some entities don't call themselves board of directors, they call themselves something else. But the principle is the same. They are at the top, they're responsible for leading the company and making proper decisions. So you can see right off the top, if I raise the question in week 5, what are the basic responsibilities of the board of directors? You have 4 or 5 of them that you can give right away without even losing any sleep. I guess that's a hint as well. All right. Now, the board is responsible for hiring the management team, CEO and his gang. And so the management team then that is hired by the board is responsible for the day-to-day. The board is not responsible for the day-to-day running of the firm. The board's management team that is selected by the board is responsible for doing that. The board will give oversight of senior management. Senior management should report to the board. Seems very simple in principle. If it's done correctly, it adds value to the firm, entity. If it is not done correctly, it, of course, reduces the firm's value and sometimes even its very existence. So every day, folks get up in the firm. If you're a board, you know what you should be thinking about. If you're a management team, you know what you should be thinking about. Are they all doing what they should be thinking about? The answer is no. Some persons are always running their own program. Ignoring these guiding principles, they create their own set of guiding principles, which are oftentimes in violation of the ones we're talking about. And when that happens, you start hearing all the gruesome stories about failures and reputational damage and all the other non-compliance issues that plague those companies that continue to persist in violating the rules, unfortunately. So management has oversight. The board also has another responsibility, and we'll see some more of that discussion later. And that responsibility is for creating and selecting what we call committees. Committees at the board level are absolutely crucial, and we're going to see the different types of committees as we go and what their responsibilities are. Okay? But certainly, these committees by their very nature, are designed to assist the overall board in gathering information, monitoring processes, making sure that the board's goals and objectives are being carried out, and reporting to the board at the various board meetings. Oftentimes, a lot of boards are only as effective as the work of their committees. And so these committees at the board level have become a very staple set of what we call subgroups on the board. And the results of their work is often crucial to the board's success. One committee in particular is the Audit Committee, which we will hear more about as we go down the line. But certainly the Audit Committee primary job is to interact with external auditors, which brings us to the discussion that we'll be looking at in the second half of this semester, the issue of accounting and financial governance. Okay? And so this audit committee really is to make sure that the financial and accounting governance side of things are being conducted appropriately. And so their job is to make sure that the auditors come in and do their jobs, that the auditors report correctly on what they find within entities, that the auditors, if they discover anything that is wrong or non-compliant, that they will report it and disclose it completely, that the auditors will seek not to hide or fail to report. That's the audit committee's job. It's a big job. And once they get the information, the audit committee then goes back to the board and reports. Okay? Big job. One of the big issues in entities that create a whole lot of governance issues is that annual audit, which for public companies and others are conducted once per year. And oftentimes this is where we run into the governance issues and problems, and the audit committee's job is to make sure that that process goes as smoothly as possible. The other area that audit committees are responsible for to the board is the issue of internal controls. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard that expression before, internal controls. Anybody knows what that is? Anybody knows what internal controls are? Don't be afraid to guess. Make up something.
That's normally your internal system,
Uh-huh.
like the softwares and stuff that you use to operate the company.
Okay, so the use of software to operate. What do you think? What do you think the internal controls are designed to do? Anyone? What do you think they're designed to do?
I was thinking internal controls would be certain things that they put in place to ensure that we're doing the right thing.
Your thinking is correct. I couldn't put it more simply myself. Putting processes in place to make sure that people are doing the right thing. Simple as that. Okay? And for the audit committee, that means internal controls over financial reporting to make sure the accounting department is doing things properly with the assistance of the external auditors, and certainly over the risk management of the firm, because sometimes the board does not spend enough time looking at risk issues that they should, or even worse, they spend time ignoring risk issues, which is a whole other problem. Okay? There's a great argument going on all the time as to whether boards are looking at risk issues enough, or to what extent are they actually ignoring them, and should we consider them to be the lesser of two evils. Either way, the discussion is appropriate in both cases. So yes, putting things in place to make sure that things are going according to plan. Okay? So whenever you hear that term internal control, please know that it's the putting in place things to make sure that the policies and procedures of the company or the entity are going as planned, and if they are not, then taking corrective action. Okay? So that is a very important expression to know and to remember. Okay? for your own personal development and for your professional development as well. And certainly if you find yourself at the board level or somewhere in the firm where you are responsible for internal controls, it becomes a critical concept. And truth be told, no matter where we are in the firm, we have some responsibility for internal controls anyway. Because even if we work in the lower levels of the firm and we see an internal control violation, we should take steps to correct it and or report it if necessary. So we're all involved, not only the audit committee, we're all involved, even as employees down the line with internal control issues. The other committee that's important at the board level, crucial, is what we call the Nominating Committee, sometimes referred to as the Corporate Governance Committee. At the board level, these guys and girls go out from the board to make sure that persons who leave the board, and more importantly, those who join the board, are qualified and capable of doing the work that they're required to do. That's the job of the Nominating Committee, which means that they have to be objective in their work. They cannot bring on all of their buddies who will just do what everybody says and who is planning to just have a great time collecting money at the board level, having fun, and not taking those responsibilities very seriously. So it's a huge job for the Nominating Committee. They have to be independent, because oftentimes when you sit on a nominating committee, all of your friends show up to sit on your board, but not all of your friends should be on that board for obvious reasons. Friendships sometimes lead to bias, and bias oftentimes leads to decisions that are not good at the board level or any level. So it's important this nominating committee is independent enough to bring on persons who they feel will make decisions that are appropriate to the board in the long run. Okay? Absolutely crucial. Oftentimes, this process is referred to as succession planning, and we call it that because boards come and go, some people leave, new people come on, and the nominating committee's job is to make sure that the new people coming on are certainly appropriate for the task. I think we mentioned last week in our discussions that it is absolutely crucial for us to bear in mind the job of the NED. Anybody remembers what NED means again?
Exactly. Non-executive director or something like that.
Absolutely that. Non-executive directors. Remember we said last week that that person is expected to be what? Anybody remembers? That NED, what do they expect it to be?
Objective.
Absolutely.
Objective.
Objective, such that if the other board members are suggesting something they feel is not good for the company, they have to be bold enough, objective enough to stand up and say, I don't agree, and here's why. Now, they might still outvote that person, but they have to go down in the board minutes as having disagreed, and the reasons for disagreeing should be recorded in the minutes. It is bad governance for the chairman or anybody else on the board when the NED objects and gives a reason to say to the secretary taking the minutes, leave that out of the minutes. That is not acceptable. The whole idea for taking minutes is so that the entire process can be recorded. Any board member or chairman of the board who suggests that something important be left out of the minutes, they are practicing bad governance. My. You would think something that appears to be as simple as that, but that act is not simple at all at the board level. It will not be tolerated by regulators who are looking at minutes and they discover that something important was deliberately left out. Somehow, that will not go down well. My. All right, so yeah, the nominating.
Mr. Wilkinson, I have a Question.
Yes.
How would the shareholders find out if something was taken out of the meeting or of the minutes?
Good question. Not only might the shareholders find out, but regulators might find out. Remember them? And who wants to tangle with a regulator? Anyone in this room wants to tangle with a regulator?
No.
No. We shouldn't want to tangle with the regulator. But here's how one can find out. Remember, I don't know if I used this expression last week, but we have some people that we call whistleblowers. Remember them? Anybody remember that word, whistleblowers?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, what do whistleblowers do?
They report the bad behavior of the company to regulators or media.
Or maybe even shareholders. See?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they can find out. Somebody might blow the whistle. And oftentimes, you don't know who's blown the whistle. And the reason why whistleblowers are kept secret is because we don't want whistleblowers to be harassed or even physically hurt because of the information they give. And that is exactly how shareholders and regulators and even others can find out about the omission.
And also by disgruntled employees, like
Absolutely.
employees that would have gotten fired and wrongfully, they normally would go to the regulators too.
Definitely. Absolutely. Okay. And depending on who that employee might be, for example, if that employee, you have no idea what an excellent point that is. If that employee happens to be, could be another employee, but just for the sake of making it juicy, practical, and more serious in its nature, if that employee happens to be a compliance officer or a flicking MLRO, then yes, that can be a very interesting situation. Okay? And so, and the reason why this whole thing becomes important, and the reason why the compliance officer and MLRO are in there, along with all the other things that are in place, committees, etc., is again to encourage people to practice what? Good governance, that's all. It's nothing personal. Some people take it personally because they want to do stuff and get away with it, but it's really not personal at all. And so when we fire a compliance officer for no good reason, or fire an MLR or even another employee, yes, of course, they could blow the whistle. And depending on the jurisdiction, they encourage them to blow the whistle. Oh, really? They fired you? Come in and tell us why. And if the regulator discovers that the reason is because they sought to do the job according to the policy and the law, well, that doesn't bode well for that entity. For those of you who may be on top of your quote unquote game, you may be aware that in the last couple of years, compliance officers and MLROs had a short shelf life in some entities. That is not something that regulators in the Bahamas and around the world are not aware of. They are. And oftentimes it's not because of poor performance. My. So you guys who decided to sign up for a governance class, probably not thinking all along the way that all of these major issues are involved, but they are. And they involve every one of you, no matter what your level is in your organization in one form or another. And as you move up the line, as you become a CEO MLRO, as you become a board member, as you become a committee member, etc., it only heightens the game, quote unquote, because it's certainly not a game. It's serious business. Okay? Wow. So yes, we are going to read some stuff and all this kind of stuff and get through our examinations. But see these things we're discussing? They are the foundational issues that will either make you or break you in your organizations in terms of your performance with regards to governance. They make and break people every day, by the way. These same things we're talking about, etc., 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 as we'll see. Another important committee, the compensation committee. These are the people who go out and set board salaries. Imagine the politicking that goes on with that committee. Board members wanting to maximize how much they can be paid, whatever other benefits, whether they can borrow from at the board level, etc. The compensation committee. If you think the audit committee needs to be objective, imagine these guys and girls. Okay. They have to make sure that the salary packages of the board members and the CEO and senior management are all fair, that they don't underpay them or overpay them, that they don't approve benefits that they shouldn't get, that they don't use the company's money and other resources for their own, at least allow it to happen through not doing the job of the compensation committee properly. Okay? If the CEO comes and said, I should be paid twice as much, the committee should be able to say, why, Mr. Chairman? And he says, well, I'm the most important person on this board. Do I need another reason? And the committee might say, yes, you do, because we're responsible for the company's resources. And then the chairman might say, well, don't get me mad before I change this committee or to kick you off. And then you'll say, well, feel free to kick me off, Mr. Chairman, but I have a responsibility as long as I'm a member of this compensation committee.
I have a question.
Yes.
I hope this isn't a silly question. So can they be considered like the HR of I guess the company?
Well, that first of all, that's not a silly question. And secondly, they could be considered the HR at the board level. Yes. That's an interesting way to put it, but yes. Okay? Because really, well, we know HR has a lot of other responsibilities, but compensation and management and all that stuff is part of the HR function. Even though we know, for better or for worse, that HR heads can only make recommendation. At the end of the day, it'll go to the CEO and or the board. But certainly a lot of recommendations from the compensation side might emanate initially from the HR area. And of course, the HR area will get the results of the recommendations or the decisions made at the board level. And again, the HR area may or may not agree, same as the compensation committee. And they have to decide at different levels what they're going to do about it. Are they going to succumb to the board's final decision, or are they going to blow the whistle? Good, that no such thing as a stupid question. That's an excellent question. They are the HR. It's an interesting way to look at it at the board level. Because money discussions at the board level, if you've never sat on the board or you're not aware of what's going on, is an amazing phenomenon. Okay? And so if you're sitting on that committee, you have to be very firm in your resolve, well informed about how compensation packages should work, at what levels, and for what reasons. Okay? You can't be sitting on that committee just because you're somebody's friend. You need to have information and knowledge on how to help that committee make proper decisions. Okay? All right. Now, think about this. After saying all of that, then we get down to the board and its management team working together. What are they working together to do? Well, they're working together for two reasons. One, to manage the day-to-day affairs of the firm, and equally as important, to stay in touch with their shareholders. Because really, the board is responsible to the shareholders. And so they should be in communication with them regularly. They should tell them the truth, good or bad. And they should do everything possible to increase the value of the company, which increases the value of the company shares, which is what shareholders want to hear. Some boards, if they're not doing that successfully, they stop communicating with the shareholders. They stop telling them everything. They try to hide stuff. They take financial information and turn it around. They only tell them what they want them to know, and eventually it starts to get a little messy until shareholders get information from somewhere, pick up on something, get impatient, pissed, or whatever it is, and force the board either to disclose properly or change the entire board or some version of its composition, so that they can get a group of people who will cooperate and communicate properly with them. It's a big time responsibility that is held by board and senior management. Because in some companies, entities, boards and senior management actually come together to quote unquote gang up on shareholders. Gang up meaning they decide that they're not going to be upfront with them for any number of reasons. And once again, that is poor governance, but we always have a group somewhere in the world, Bahamas included, where they do not want to follow the rules for one reason or another. All too often, the common denominator is, does anybody know? What do you think the common denominator for most of the problems were is poor governance? Make a guess.
Money.
Money, money, money. Anybody heard that song from back in the 70s? Money, money, money. Anybody heard that song? No? My.
Yes.
Oh, you did. So you know that song, money, money, money. That one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people got to what? Have it. That's part of the song. Some people really, really what? Love it.
Oh, I know that part out.
I know. For your homework, for your homework for tonight, when this class is over, go to YouTube and type in the song Money, Money, Money and listen to it. You'll see that even though it's a couple decades, I can't believe I'm that old already. I used to be young a minute ago. You'll see when you listen to that song why we have poor governance even at the entity levels, not only at the individual levels alone. Okay. Common denominator, money, money, money. Doggone it. All right. And then on top of all that, the board has to not only consider its responsibilities to the firm, its responsibilities for getting the best senior management team in place and watching them, its responsibilities to shareholders who are the owners of the company, but they also have responsibilities to some other constituents. Okay? So if somebody asks you to be a board member, don't say, yeah, this is great, caviar, wine, and trips, and money. That's true, maybe, at some boards. But you should know by now, week number 2, that really the true essence of being a board member is not necessarily all that party stuff. It is a huge responsibility. Okay? But a lot of board members are still not taking as seriously as they should. So who else should board members consider other than those that we've mentioned already? How about employees? If the firm does well, people have a job, they get an income, they can buy a home, they can send their children to school, they can buy a car, pay high gas prices, and so on. Your customers, how about them? You have a responsibility to them. When you mess up your firm, you mess up your customers who use the services of your firm. If you have suppliers, when you mess up your firm, you mess up your business with your suppliers. They have to now do some other stuff. Wait to get paid from you, go elsewhere, etc. And let's not forget, if your entity is part of your community, which it usually is, when you mess up, you and your community is stuck. Like, what the hell? And who's going to give money to charity now, the Ranfley Home for Children? Excuse me, anybody in this classroom are familiar with the Ranfley Home for Children?
Yes.
Okay. What do they do there? Anybody knows?
It's a home for kids. It's just like a housing.
Yeah, it's a housing area for children who are what?
Abandoned.
By whom?
Their
Their
parents
parents.
or guardians died or
Yeah, we actually have that stuff in the Bahamas, children being abandoned by their parents.
yes,
More
sir.
than you think.
More than we think. Absolutely my point. While we're busy discovering governance issues and having fun, we have that happening more than we think. Is that a governance issue for some entity? Rankly home for children. Do they have governance issues there, you think?
Oh, yes, they do.
Oh,
Yes, sir, that they do, of course.
absolutely. So see, this governance thing is not just for the fancy multi-million, billion-dollar financial institutions, the credit unions who are having fun, the money exchanges, and all the securities activity that's going on in the marketplace. See, DeAndre's people, broker dealers who are buying and selling securities and having fun. Even right down to the Ranfley Home for Children on Mackey Street. How about that? They might have governance issues there. I wonder what they could be. Does anybody know who's responsible for overseeing that? Like, for example, the central bank is responsible for overseeing financial institutions. Does anybody know who's responsible for overseeing governance at the Ranfley Home?
Would it be social service?
Could be, but we don't really know for sure because we don't really hear much about that, do we? Not really. Okay, I'm just being the devil's advocate because I want you young professionals to see that this thing that you are studying, reading, talking about, being examined on and all that stuff, this is very pervasive. Whether you have thought about it or not, it is. And perhaps after these next few weeks, your perspective on how you look at things should not be quite the same. Serious business, this governance thing. All right. So yeah, we have all these other constituents. Let's not forget the government. Government is in everybody's business. And government looks like they're trying to get further and further into everybody's business everywhere in the world. Speaking about everywhere in the world, anybody aware of the war in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Any governance issues there? Are there any governance issues there? The war in Ukraine.
Yes, sir, because they were seeking help and they don't have a big enough
Yeah.
army to fight Russia.
That's the first problem. Should Russia be in there in the first place?
No, sir.
Oh, that's the first problem. They shouldn't be there in the first place. They just decided they're going to a sovereign country and totally seek to destroy it just because they think they could. If that's not bad governance, somebody tell me what that is. See my point? It's not just the firms we work in. Now that things are going on so long, they say he's now trying to conscript young men to go fight in the war. And so they're leaving the country. They're running away because they don't want to be killed for stupid stuff. Can you blame them?
Some of the persons that are fighting didn't even know what they were fighting for.
My point exactly. More bad governance. See my point? Now they want to send more young men in to fight for something they don't know anything about. Foolish stuff. This governance thing is a very serious thing. Well, there's some food for thought to show you once again how pervasive governance issues are. Okay? All right. So I think I bombarded you enough the last hour or so with these very fundamental yet crucial issues regarding governance. And somewhere along the way, they should change some aspect of your perspective somewhere without a shadow of a doubt, hopefully, because they are very serious and they are ongoing and they will go nowhere and they are everywhere. You turn, you go to church, governance issues. Your children go to school, governance issues. You government of a country, political governance issues. The world, governance issues. See? Firms, financial institutions, all everywhere. My. All right. Okay. Gia, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, lovely. I think you had started reading for us at the end of the session last week, am I correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. So if you can go down to the bottom of page 2 where it says key corporate actors and kick off from that point, that would be great. Give me a break.
Okay. Okay, 1 second.
Right to the bottom of page 2 says, well, 2 on my thing. It says key corporate actors.
Okay, you guys can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so key corporate actors. Effective corporate governance requires a clear understanding of the respective roles of the board, management, and shareholders, their relationships with each other, and their relationships with other corporate stakeholders. Before discussing the core guiding principles of corporate governance, Business Roundtable believes describing the roles of these key corporate actors is important. So the board of directors has the vital role of overseeing the company's management and business strategies to achieve long-term value creation. Selecting a well-qualified chief executive officer, CEO, to lead the company, monitoring and evaluating the CEO's performance, and overseeing the CEO succession planning process are some of the most important functions of the board. The board delegates to the CEO and through the CEO to other senior management the authority and responsibility for operating the company's business. Effective directors are diligent monitors, but not managers of business operations. They exercise vigorous and diligent oversight of the company's affairs, including key areas such as strategy and risk, but they do not manage or micromanage the company's business by performing or duplicating tasks of the CEO and senior management team.
Before you go on, Gia, just hoping that you guys are letting some of these very key things sink in as she's reading. That's the whole reason why I like to do this process as a group. You see, sometimes when you're reading on your own, you're just like, man, I'm so freaking tired. I don't care if I don't remember anything now, and so on. But when we're doing these things tend to illuminate themselves. Like the board is not supposed to micromanage. What does micromanage mean? Anyone?
Be all up in your stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Who the hell said that?
Me.
Be all the hell up in your stuff. Okay, we have some managers, for example, not even at the board level, just everyday managers and supervisors. They like to micromanage. They're like, you can't move. Every time you move, they are breathing down your neck. Every 5 minutes, are we there yet? Are we there? Man, good managers do not micromanage. Good managers, when they do not micromanage. When you micromanage, you disturb your employees. You do not give them the confidence they need to get the job done. If you're not there, they don't know what the next thing is to do because they're so busy helping you breathe down their neck. They're afraid to come into work even. Sometimes they call in sick. I'm going to call in sick once or twice a month just so I can get a break from that check. Dude, micromanaging me. Every minute they're breathing down my neck. Boards are not required to do that. They should hire a competent senior management team, in their opinion, and let them do their work. Just checking in to see that things are getting done according to plan. Okay. I've managed many people in my life in many different areas, many different financial institutions, private banks, etc. And I've sometimes gotten flack from senior management at my level and above. Mr. Wilkinson, you don't seem to be in sufficiently involved with your employer. I said, meaning what? That I don't micromanage or something? I said, the truth is I don't. I tell them what their responsibilities are. I tell them if they have any problems, let me know so we can resolve them. And I will raise key questions as appropriate. I am not breathing down any professional person's neck. People don't grow when you do that. Organizations don't do as well as they could when you do that. Okay? So this thing about the board not micromanaging, that is actually a very crucial issue. And any entity that has a board micromanaging, there's a problem somewhere. Believe it or not. Sorry, Gia, just had to throw that micromanagement thing in. Keep going.
No problem. I understand your feelings.
Indeed.
Okay, where was I? Okay, so the distinction between oversight and management is not always precise, and some situations, such as a crisis, may require greater board involvement in operational matters. In addition, in some areas, such as relationship with the outside auditor and executive compensation, the board has a direct role instead of an oversight role. Management, led by the CEO, is responsible for setting, managing, and executing the strategies of the company, including but not limited to running the operations of the company under the oversight of the board and keeping the board informed of the status of the company's operations. Management's responsibilities include strategic planning, risk management, and financial reporting. An executive management team runs the company with a focus on executing the company's strategy over a meaningful time horizon and avoids an undue emphasis on short-term metrics. Shareholders.
Before you go on, what do you guys think we mean by short-term metrics? That fancy expression. What do you think that means? Sounds pretty fancy. Right out of a business textbook. Short-term metrics. What do you think they mean? Anyone? Make a guess.
Short-term goals or target?
Yeah. What's the problem with focusing on short-term goals only? What's the problem when we focus on short-term goals only?
You don't see the big picture?
Yeah, we don't see the big picture, folks. And there are some management people, even at the board level, who only look at short-term goals, what they're going to achieve next month to impress the shareholders, what they're going to achieve by the shareholders meeting so that they could be reelected to the board. They're not looking down the road 3, 5, 10 years down the road for the company and making decisions based on that. Okay, so these short-term goals can be very detrimental. Okay, I remember, for example, when little Sam, that's my firstborn son. Oh, I'm so happy. For my own son. But when he was born, and I used to come home rush home from work every day and look in the crib and think, he doesn't seem to be growing. He's the same size as yesterday and last week. Okay, until suddenly one day I came home and he was standing up in the crib, like with a big grin on his face. And then I suddenly realized, not that it was a big shock to me. I knew before he was born, but I'm just making a point that yes, I have to plan to feed him every day, clothe him and all that stuff every day. But I also have to start thinking, what school is he going to go to when he starts school? What primary school is he going to go to? What high school is he going to go to? What university is he going to go to? And all this kind of stuff. What is my point? Yes, short-term goals have their place, but they cannot be our only focus in the firm or any entity. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem, Houston, as many firms discover. But then some persons who are practicing bad management, they focus on short-term goals for a reason. And usually those reasons are selfish ones, personal ones, and common denominator money ones, which is not good. Okay, Jaya, keep going. You keep saying interesting stuff.
All right, shareholders. Shareholders invest in a corporation by buying its stock and receive economic benefits in return. Shareholders are not involved in the day-to-day management of business operations, but they have the right to elect representatives, directors, and to receive information material to investments and voting decisions. Shareholders should expect corporate boards and managers to act as long-term stewards of the investments in the corporation. They also should expect that the board and management will be responsive to issues and concerns that are of widespread interest to long-term shareholders and affect the company's long-term value. Corporations are for-profit and enterprises that are designed to provide sustainable long-term value to all shareholders. Accordingly, shareholders should not expect to use the public companies in which they invest as platforms for the advancement of their personal agendas or for the promotion of general political or social causes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
keep going.
Some shareholders may seek a voice in the company's strategic decision. Some shareholders may seek a voice in the company's strategic direction and decision-making, areas that traditionally were squarely within the realm of the board and management. Shareholders who seek this influence should recognize that this type of empowerment necessarily involves the assumption of a degree of responsibility for the goal of long-term value creation for the company and all of its shareholders. Effective corporate governance requires dedicated focus on the part of directors, the CEO, and senior management to their own responsibilities, and together with the corporation shareholders to the shared goal of building long-term value.
So before you go on, Gia, folks, you should see that this is supposed to be a partnership. This relationship between the board, senior management, and shareholders. And the more seriously we take this responsibility, this triangle. Sometimes it's a golden triangle if it's working well, and sometimes it could become the devil's triangle if the governance issues are not going well. Okay? If you work for a firm at this level or a firm that is involved in the devil's triangle version of it, that is never good. And sometimes employees down the line have no idea what's going on in these things until something explodes. Okay? All right, keep going, Gia. Key responsibilities.
So key responsibilities of the board of directors and management. An effective system of corporate governance provides the framework within which the board and management address their key responsibility. So the board of directors. A corporation's business is managed under the board's oversight. The board also has direct responsibilities for certain key matters, including the relationship with the outside auditor and executive compensation. The board's oversight function encompasses a number of responsibilities, including 1, selecting the CEO. The board selects and oversees the performance of the company's CEO and oversees the CEO's succession planning process. 2, setting the tone at the top. The board should set a tone at the top that demonstrates the company's commitment to integrity and legal compliance. This tone lays the groundwork for a corporate culture that is communicated to personnel at all levels of the organization. Number 3, approving corporate strategy and monitoring the implementation of strategic plans. The board should have meaningful input into the company's long-term strategy from development through execution, should approve the company's strategic plans, and should regularly evaluate implementation of the plans that are designed to create long-term value. The board should understand the risks inherent in the company's strategic plans and how those risks are being managed.
Let me give you an example before she goes on about this risk management recognition. And there'll be more discussions about risk management on the board. But risk management, for example, if we consider, let's say we consider creating a home to create the creation of an entity, which it is. But before the entity called a home is created, person start dating. So while you're dating, you're trying to make assessments about the person you're dating to see what the long-term perspectives might be for this entity that you are thinking about creating should you decide to get married. It's like a business, like starting a business. And so you're gonna watch this person during the dating process, hopefully, and see what characteristics are exhibited during this dating period in an effort to make a determination as to whether or not that person is going to be appropriate for creating this entity in the long term. Interestingly enough, sometimes we do that fairly well, other times we don't do a great job for some reason. Firms are like that. Okay? If we do not look at these strategic issues, and usually when we use the word strategic cost, we're not talking about an overnight affair. Okay? Strategic issues tend to be related to long-term issues. Okay? Can I be married to this person for the long term? When we add a little footsies to this thing, will this still be for the long term? Okay, those are strategic decisions. Do we have the ability to make the resources we need to make for the long term? And oftentimes, firms are expected at the board level to be thinking about their companies exactly the same. Okay, all right, keep on going, Gio.
Right. Number 4, setting the company's risk appetite, reviewing and understanding the major risks and overseeing the risk management process. The board oversees the process for identifying and managing the significant risks facing the company. The board and senior management should agree on the company's risk appetite, and the board should be comfortable that the strategic plans are consistent with it. The board should establish a structure for overseeing risk, delegating responsibility to committees, and overseeing the designation of senior management responsible for risk management. Number 5, focusing on the integrity and clarity of the company's financial reporting and other disclosures about corporate performance. The board should be satisfied that the company's financial statements are accurately present. The board should be satisfied that the company's financial statements accurately present its financial condition and results of operations, that other disclosures about the company's performance convey meaningful information about past results as well as future plans, and that the company's internal controls and procedures have been designed to detect and deter fraudulent activity.
Okay, there you go. The financial literacy side of this thing. Are these financial statements accurate? Did the auditors find any problems, or were they able to present an unqualified audit to say that all is well? Are there any internal control weaknesses? Did the auditors find any? If they did they report all of them? Did we disclose all of the problems that we have in this firm to the appropriate stakeholders? Are we hiding anything? Are we hiding anything? Okay, keep going, Jia. Are we hiding anything? Keep going.
Okay, number 6, allocating capital. The board should have meaningful inputs and decision-making authority over the company's capital allocation process and strategy to find the right balance between short-term and long-term economic returns for its shareholders. 7, reviewing, understanding, and overseeing annual operating plans and budgets. The board oversees the annual operating plans and reviews annual budgets presented by management. The board monitors implementation of the annual plans and assesses whether they are responsive to changing conditions. 8, reviewing the company's plan for business resiliency. As part of its risk oversight function, the board periodically reviews management's plans to address business resiliency, including such items as business continuity, physical security, cybersecurity, and crisis management. I think that's number 9, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9. Nominating directors and committee members and overseeing effective corporate governance. The board, under the leadership of its nominating or corporate governance committee, nominates directors and committee members and oversees the structure, composition, including independence and diversity, succession planning, practices, and evaluation of the board and its committees. And lastly, overseeing the compliance program. The board, under the leadership of appropriate committees, oversees the company's compliance program and remains informed about any significant compliance issues that may arise.
Thank you very much, Gia, for that excellent job. Whether you realize it or not, you have said a mouthful, and I'm hoping that by actually going through these points item by item, it will leave some kind of indelible mark somewhere on someone. Because I can assure you, whether you're at the board level or at the employee level, knowledge of this stuff becomes anywhere from great to know to critical to super critical. In any event, it's something that all of us need to be at least aware of. And if we're supervisors, managers, senior management, board members, etc., it becomes absolutely critical to know. Okay? And as such, we are all expected in these entities to be guided accordingly. There's an old expression that the generation before mine used to use, and probably no doubt before that, that has to do with governance. It says, go out and govern yourselves accordingly. Okay? And I think that expression still applies in this new century, for sure. All right. Thank you very much, Shia. Notice this point before the last, where the board is overseeing these committees, making sure that the composition of the boards are correct, meaning that it has its share of independence and diversity on the board, so that the board will not be subject to the all too common herd mentality, where everybody is programmed to think alike, and therefore when it's time to make decisions, there's nobody left to object. Question: since the majority of the board in some countries are made up of males at the moment, more and more women are joining boards, which is good. Do you think it's better to have all male, all female, or a combination on the board?
I think balance is important.
Balance is always important.
A combination of with males and females.
Always. It's an importance that we did not exercise well in some instances in history. And it's an importance that we're trying to switch to the opposite of what we didn't exercise properly in history. And to make your point even more valid, if we do not seek balance, we will eventually run into trouble, no matter what our intentions might be. Okay? I don't know how many persons are familiar with aspects of the Bible in this group, but it says a lot about balance. And for me personally, I respect what it has to say about balance. I've already lived it, tested it, and seen the results of balance versus imbalance. And balance is always better, no matter what our intention might be. In my lifetime, anytime we seek to put things out of balance, we usually end up with chaos and misery. How about that? All right, so thank you for that, Gia. Very important stuff. For those persons who are in compliance, anybody in this class in compliance at the moment? Just say yo if you are. That's okay. If you're not in compliance, you are under the framework of compliance somewhere. So it's still important for you to know that the board must be in constant contact with its compliance officer within the firm. The compliance officer is responsible for keeping the board apprised of any issues that are non-compliant, and it's the board's job to support the compliance officer to make sure that whatever the failures are, that they are corrected by any means possible. Any compliance officer that cannot get the cooperation of the board, something is wrong. Any board that doesn't seek to correct things that are presented to them by compliance, something is wrong. If they do not agree that something is wrong, they should sit down and come to some agreement as to whether or not that particular issue is really an issue that needs to be addressed or not. But once it is determined that it needs to be addressed, the compliance officer job is to report, and the board's job is to make sure they support compliance in getting it fixed. Sometimes issues that are reported by compliance are not agreed to by senior management, and so senior management tries to convince the board that compliance is not right, that compliance is a nuisance, or whatever the case might be. The board has to be keen on whether or not senior management is saying the correct thing to them, and if they discover that senior management is actually out of position with compliance for whatever reason, that senior management find their way back in, or they will have to make a decision about what to do with senior management. Some senior management people are successful in getting boards to militate against compliance and its recommendations, and oftentimes that results in the compliance officer being booted out of the firm. And then they try to bring in somebody who's going to be more board senior management, quote unquote, friendly, which is not the compliance officer's job, which is not the external auditor's job. They are not required to be friendly to the board nor senior management. They have one job, and that is to report anything that is out of order in that entity. That's what we mean by independence. My. So if you're going to be booted out for that, so be it. If you're an audit firm, you're not going to be called back for the audit next year, so be it. But your primary responsibility is independence. Not creating a buddy-buddy system with the board and its senior management under no circumstances. That will eventually result in poor governance eventually. My. Okay, thank you, Gia. You caused all of that. That's all I can say. All right. Let's see. Jeffries, are you there?
Come here.
Hey, Jeffries. Well, you are now required, since you're a member of this team, you are now required to pick up where Gia left off and talk to us about the all-important CEO and his or her management team. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
Interestingly enough, notice I've been saying his or her all evening. I remember once upon a time when we used to just say his, and we said that meant her too. Now it doesn't mean that you have to say his or her, he and she, he, she, other, the other thing, none other, and so on. It's getting more complicated by the century, apparently. Okay, Jeffries, let it rip. CEO and its management team.
CEO and management. The CEO and management, under the CEO's direction, are responsible for the development of the company's long-term strategic plans and the effective execution of the company's business in accordance with those strategic plans. As part of this responsibility, management is charged with the following duties: business operations. The CEO and management run the company's business under the board's oversight with a view toward building long-term value. Strategic planning. The CEO and senior management generally take the lead in articulating a vision for the company's future and in developing strategic plans designed to create long-term value for the company with meaningful input from the board. Management implements the plans following board approval, regularly reviews progress against strategic plans with the board, and recommends and carries out changes to plans as necessary.
Before you go on, Jeffries, when you mentioned strategic planning, does anybody remember what I said about strategic planning? When you hear that word or that expression, what should come to your mind first?
You said it is an overnight process.
It's not. As a matter of fact, strategic, anything means long-term, okay? Long-term. So whatever entity or responsibility you're in, when the issue of strategic planning, strategic development, strategic anything, we should immediately be thinking not of the short term, but rather the long term. I'll give you an example. I had a strategic plan for my daughter, which I never had, unfortunately. I have two sons and I love them to death. I never had the daughter that I thought I was going to have or wanted to have. But here was my strategic plan for the daughter I never had. My strategic plan for her was this. When she was born, I was going to take her everywhere and brag to everybody that this is my lovely daughter. When she started to get older, I was going to be the one to take her to the hairdresser and have all the candy curls done and blah, blah, blah. And that she was going to be in Miss something. I don't know what it was, Miss whatever it was, just for the experience of being in it and doing whatever they do. Along, of course, with my big old plans for her education, future, and determining what weapon I was going to use for any man who touches a hair on her head. See, so I had this long-term plan for the daughter I never had. But that's what strategic planning is all about. And I suppose God in his wisdom did not give me that daughter because some fool may have decided to do what to her? Touch what? A strand of hair on her head. Then I was going to end up where I shouldn't be, probably in prison, because that would not go well with me, with my little girl at all. Okay? However, I had another strategic plan when she didn't come. I had two sons instead, and no candy girls and all that. But on the other side of the fence, when they started growing up, I said to them, no matter what happens in any relationship that you have with a girl, your wife, your whomever it is, no matter what she tells you, even if it hurts your feelings, even if it's not true, do not raise your hands to ever touch her. Decide if you can live with it or not. If you decide to live with it, then live with it. If not, then not. But whatever you do not raise a finger to touch her. I don't care if she say you stink, dog, your ma, your whatever she tells you. Let it go. See, that's what we call long-term planning. Because if you don't, your long-term future might be where? In prison or in a grave. And who the hell needs that for strategic planning? See my point? That is the nature of strategic planning in the entity called the home. What we're talking about here is the firm. Same principle. Okay, Jeffries, keep going. Just
Capital allocation. The CEO and senior management are responsible for providing recommendations to the board related to capital allocation of the company's resources, including but not limited to organic growth, mergers, and acquisitions. That word.
yeah, divestitures.
Divestitures, spin-offs, maintaining and growing its physical and non-physical resources, and the appropriate return of capital to shareholders in the form of dividends, share repurchases, and other capital distribution means.
In case you guys may not really be aware of it, because some of this jargon language might be new to some of you, it's okay. That's why you learn new crap. So you learn new things. Doesn't matter if it's new, like, oh, what the hell? What did I sign up for? You signed up for exactly what you signed up for, to learn new stuff. So when you see the word divestiture, it's like, what the flick is that? No problem. You either say, well, what the hell is that? Or you go to Google, so let me see what the hell that is, divestiture. And then you'll discover, oh, that's just going into getting rid of existing businesses and doing some other things. Let me just put that in my repertoire. So when I hear that one again, I'll be able to respond appropriately. And at the board level, the term divestiture should not be a foreign word, because some boards have to make the decision to divest some of its existing business, get out, because they're failing, and do something else. See? That's the whole idea about involving yourselves with this crazy stuff that you guys are sitting down to do every week. That's the point. Okay? So don't worry about it. What about this expression, return of capital? That is a financial expression. See, the literacy side. We're not even discussing the accounting side yet, but literacy stuff's coming up. What is anybody ever heard that expression, return of capital?
It's like giving back the money, giving back the funds that they initially got.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be one example, return on capital. If you make an investment, you get interest on it. If you make an investment, you get interest plus your principal back when it matures in case of bonds. So yeah, and in terms of shareholders are always looking for dividends. Anybody knows what a dividend is? What is a
It's a
dividend?
portion that's paid out to the shareholders in the company
Absolutely,
annually.
absolute. May not be annually, but in some companies it's annually. In others, it's whenever the board decides. And in others, they take too long, to the extent that some holders are like, hello, what the hell is this board doing? Start paying us dividends or else. What you may not know, that it is not mandatory for the board to approve dividends for shareholders every year. It is not a legal requirement, for better or for worse, okay? Share dividends are paid whenever the board sits down and decides that the company can afford to pay a dividend. Some boards pay annually, others pay every 3 years, others pay every 5 years, others pay whenever they feel like paying, and eventually they run into trouble with shareholders who are like, really? You think we invested our money in this company just for our health? Start paying us some dividends, and we're going to get rid of you and put in a bloody board that will pay some dividends. Okay, there you go. So now, out of this corporate governance thing that you signed up for, and literacy thing, you're now picking up all kinds of little things that maybe you may not have been aware of before. And that's the whole idea, to give you this kind of diversified perspective of governance. One that just goes beyond, okay, the board sets the tone at the top. Well, that's true. But as you can see so far, in just 2 short weeks, that it's a whole lot more expression in good corporate governance than just that, or the little itsy bitsy pieces you may have heard of before. Okay, Jeffries, keep going.
Identifying, evaluating, and managing risk. Management identifies, evaluates, and manages the risk that the company undertakes in implementing its strategic plans and conducting its business. Management also evaluates whether these risk and related risk management efforts are consistent with the company's risk appetite. Senior management keeps the board and relevant committees informed about the company's significant risk and its risk management processes. Accurate and transparent financial reporting and disclosures. Management is responsible for the integrity of the company's financial reporting system and the accurate and timely preparation of the company's financial statements and related disclosures. It is management's responsibility under the direction of the CEO and the company's principal financial officer to establish, maintain, and periodically evaluate the company's internal controls over financial reporting and the company's disclosure controls and procedures, including the ability of such controls and procedures to detect and deter fraudulent activity.
Take a pen, Jeffries. We cannot go further without saying something about procedures to detect and deter fraudulent activity. Part of internal control process, which is part of good governance process, is trying to detect and deter. What does detect mean? If somebody defrauds the company, hopefully you have things in place to find out and deal with them. Deter, what does that mean? Anyone? What does deter mean?
To prevent.
To prevent, absolutely. Where possible, to prevent. So, simple example. If you have inventory under lock and key, it's easier to control than having it in the open, for sure. For example, supermarkets and other companies that have warehouses with inventory in them, they report millions of dollars per year in pilferage. What is pilferage? Employees running off with stuff. Now, when employees run off with stuff, they might come up with reasons like, I work here, they owe me, they pay me this stinking little bit of money, so this makes up for whatever they don't pay me, whatever our reasons are. But pilferage is still really theft, which is still illegal, which still costs entities millions of dollars a year whenever this happens. And it does happen every year. Millions of dollars in pilferage. So firms are constantly looking at ways to detect and deter fraudulent activity, theft, and all related matters. Okay? While we're busy doing our day-to-day, it may look like nothing is happening, but depending on where you work, stuff is happening. May not be happening with you, but somebody is making it happen. Otherwise, we would not have to put all these controls in place and have these monitoring systems and auditors coming in to check to make sure information is correct and true and fair, and that financial information are properly reported and the disclosures are complete and correct. But sometimes disclosures that are made in financial statements are not correct. And their inaccuracy is not oftentimes an oversight, it is deliberate, designed to create situations where folks will not detect any wrongdoing, whatever that might be. Okay, keep going, Jeffries.
Annual operating plans and budgets. Senior management develops annual operating plans and budgets for the company and presents them to the board. The management team implements and monitors the operating plans and budgets, making adjustments in light of changing conditions, assumptions, and expectations, and keeps the board apprised of significant developments and changes. Selecting qualified management, establishing an effective organizational structure, and ensuring effective succession planning. Senior management selects qualified management, implements an organizational structure, and develops and executes thoughtful career development and succession planning strategies that are appropriate for the company. Business resiliency. Management develops, implements, and periodically reviews plans for business resiliency that provide the most critical protection in light of the company's operations. Risk identification. Management identifies the company's major business and operational risks, including those relating to natural disasters, leadership gaps, physical security, cybersecurity, regulatory changes, and other matters. Crisis preparedness. Management develops and implements crisis preparedness and response plans and works with the board to identify situations such as a crisis involving senior management in which the board may need to assume a more active response role.
Now, before you go on to the board structure, Jeffries, why we all understand, I hope, the issue of cybersecurity, which has become a bigger and bigger problem as we speak. Because as we speak, somebody's breaking into somebody's cybersecurity system right now, seeking to get money or just simply making a nuisance of themselves or to make some entity responsible or simply for the hell of it, believe it or not. So that's a big problem. Some entities consider regulators to be a big problem for some reason. If you're doing things, if your governance is right, you don't have to worry about regulators. You welcome them. You answer their questions. You respond to their questions, queries, and concerns. Any entity that keeps having a problem with a regulator, they are probably up to something that they shouldn't be up to. Regulators are quick to identify this as well, sometimes. And so it makes them suspicious. If you're the kind of entity when regulators say they're coming, to say, come along, we have no problem. What do you need? That's the better position to be in than to constantly be scrambling around and complaining about the regulators, for sure. Any company that ignores cybersecurity, they'll live to regret it in the 21st century. Cyber criminals are on the increase, just like all the other criminals are on the increase. And so boards and senior management have to be constantly thinking about how they're going to protect their information. Okay? Not only from persons who want a couple of bucks, but from the competition. Question, why would you want to protect your information from competition, class?
So they don't steal your client.
Yeah, say they don't steal the information. And eventually cause your demise, believe it or not. Or certainly cause your business to be reduced significantly, if not your demise. See? A lot of things going on. Not necessarily for the reasons that you might think, which means that boards and senior managements have to be thinking way out the box. If you're just thinking about filling your pockets and going on trips, you're not going to be doing a good job for that firm that you're managing as a senior management or board level person. Because there are a whole lot of problems, as you can see: risk identification and remediation, crisis preparedness, which includes all kinds of issues like cybersecurity issues. What are we going to do about these? We cannot wait until they occur. We have to pre-plan, think about these in advance, put things in place in advance, put controls in place in advance. Look at this very interesting point that she made a minute ago. Creating response plans and works with the board to identify situations such as a crisis involving senior management. Now, class, how does that become a crisis preparedness issue? Crisis with senior management? What does that mean? Don't they all get along? Anyone? Don't they all get along? Don't all employees get along?
No, sir.
No, they don't.
No, sir.
No, don't they all like each other?
No, sir.
No, they don't. Don't they all want the best for each other since we're all working in the best interest of the firm?
No, sir.
Everybody.
Yeah. Everybody seems to have their own agenda sometimes. And so, yeah, same thing happens at the senior management level and even at the board level. So this creates a crisis for the firm from time to time. And those firms who are smart will sit down and ask themselves at the board and senior management level, Do you have any crisis preparedness? Look at, because crisis issues create risk management issues. And if they're not dealt with, then sooner or later, they will raise their ugly heads, and then your firm will be in the news again because of the consequences of not being prepared or not taking action by all means. Okay. All right, Jeffries, keep going. The board structure.
Board
How-
structure.
How is it made up? Yes.
Public companies employ diverse approaches to board structure and operations within the parameters of applicable legal requirements and stock market rules. Although no one structure is right for every company, Business Roundtable believes that the practices set forth in the following sections provide an effective approach for companies to follow. Board composition, size. In determining appropriate board size, directors should consider the nature, size, and complexity of the company, as well as its stage of development. Larger boards often bring the benefit of, larger boards, I just lost where I was.
Okay.
Larger boards often bring the benefit of broader mix of skills, backgrounds, and experience, while smaller boards may be more cohesive and may be able to address issues and challenges more quickly. Composition. The composition of a board should reflect the diversity of thought, background, skills, experiences, and expertise, and a range of tenures that are appropriate given to the company's current and anticipated circumstances, and that collectively enable the board to perform its oversight function effectively. Diversity. Diverse backgrounds and experiences on corporate boards, including those of directors who represent the broad range of society, strengthen board performance and promote the creation of long-term shareholder value. Board should develop a framework for identifying appropriately diverse candidates that allows the Nominating Corporate Governance Committee to consider women, minorities, and others with diverse backgrounds as candidates for each open board seat.
Pick up pen, Jeffries, you said it again. We are now in the age where boards are being asked to consider women board members, and we have some, but they don't believe it's enough yet. Minorities. Who are minorities, class? Who are
Anyone with smaller population.
Yeah, anybody that is considered a smaller population that might be based on maybe race,
Religion.
or color, or whatever the case might be. For example, in the United States, Black people are considered to be minorities. Indians are considered to be minorities. Jews are considered to be minorities. Asian Americans are considered to be minorities, and so on. Do you have any minorities in the Bahamas? Just giving you some music while you think. Any minorities in the Bahamas?
Yes,
Really? Who are they?
Haitians,
Jamaicans, and other nationalities that make up the minorities in the Bahamas. What about Conky Joes? Are they minorities?
No, they Bahamians.
I know, but are they minorities?
I don't think so.
Yes, because African Americans are Americans, and they're Black and they're
Yeah,
minorities.
minorities, yes.
I see what you did there.
A little sneaky, isn't it? So in terms of the fact that the greater population of the Bahamas is now what?
Black Bahamian.
Yeah, so we are Funky Joes are white Bahamians, but they are minorities. That's how minorities work. Minority shareholders are those who only have a small amount of shares in the company. Does that mean they're not important? No, they have a voice as well. Any one of you who buys shares in Cable Bahamas, Batelco, wherever, and you may only have 100 shares or 300 while other people have thousands, You are a minority shareholder. Does that mean your voice is any less important? Pounds?
No.
So they might treat you that way, but it doesn't, in law, your voice is just as important with your little itsy bitsy number of shares as those thousands of shares. Okay. So that's the whole point. They're saying, yes, in the past, boards have been primarily made up of men. And the reason why boards have been primarily made up of men, because throughout history, men are the ones who went out there and conquered, fought, got their guts cut out, did all the wheeling and dealing and stuff, while women and others kind of stayed home and look after have the children so that we could have more people to kill, wheel and deal and so on, so to speak. And so that's why it primarily happened. Now that the world is now, they say, more sophisticated, and et cetera, there should be more involvement by women, minorities, and others. And that is absolutely true. Okay. What we have to be careful is that we don't go from one extreme to the next and create what we talked about earlier, that thing called an imbalance. All right. So yeah, these are important things persons are looking at. Now, diversity also has been extended to more than just minorities and women. We have a new set of expressions for diversity in the world. Another group of people who are called this, that, and the other thing. That's a whole different ball game. And of course, they are considered minorities as well. All right, so you youngsters have an interesting time ahead of you, and whether you become board members, senior management people, supervisors, managers, or just employees. Remember, there's no such thing as just employees. We say that because we have a strata in firms, but without employees, nothing else, nothing else works for sure. There's no such thing as just employees. Employees are critical, being critical. And sometimes people up the ladder seem as if they forget. They start feeling so God-like. They forget that they are servants and that employees are critical to the process. And without employees, dog eat that firm's lunch. Okay, keep going.
Tenure. Directors with a range of tenures can contribute to the effectiveness of a board. Recent additions to the board may provide new perspectives, while directors who have served for a number of years bring experience, continuity, institutional knowledge, and insight into the company's business and industry. Characteristics. Every director should have integrity, strong character, sound judgment, an objective mind, and the ability to represent the interests of all shareholders rather than the interests of particular constituencies.
So if I were to say to you in your test, list 3 characteristics of every director should have, you could almost guess them. Okay? If you seek to be, mind you, remember, all of us are expected to have those characteristics no matter where we work. But we are saying that at the board level, these are especially important. Not that they're less important anywhere else, at the board level, because these people are the ones who guide the future of the entity. That's the point. Okay, keep going. Experience.
Experience. Directors with relevant business and leadership experience can provide the board a useful perspective on business strategy and significant risk and an understanding of the challenges facing the business.
Question. Sorry, before you go on again, Jeffries, I know you just keep raising interesting stuff. For a financial entity, should a financial entity have a bishop with no financial experience or background on the board?
No.
Probably not. However, that same bishop might be great for the board of a charity or a religious entity or some other such thing. In other words, this experience thing is not a personal thing. It should be question. Yes.
Okay, you're saying that they have to have experience in order to be on the board.
Who?
Sorry?
Who has, you said, does somebody have to have experience?
Yeah, is that what you're saying? I apologize.
No, you don't necessarily have to have experience. But depending on the type of entity that whose board you're sitting on, certain kinds of experience would be vital if you're going to be effective and productive on that board.
Okay, because I was about to ask, like, how does that relate onto like a NED? Because I thought we were saying that the NED supposed to be like impartial, and I guess they would still need to have some type of experience in order to be on the board still.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, very good point though that you made. Uh, Even though the NED is expected to be impartial and independent, they do need to have a certain amount of experience to sit on a particular type of board, by all means. Because remember, even though they're expected to be impartial and independent, they are also expected to function as a normal board member as well, as a normal member of the board, which means that they should have certain input, financial, social, economical, or whatever their backgrounds might be, to put into the board and its decision-making process, by all means. What makes them special, it shouldn't make them special, but what does make them special is that they are expected to be impartial and independent. Now, what is interesting about that point that you made is that here is the irony. While NEDs are expected to be impartial and independent, all board members are expected to be what?
Partial.
Impartial and independent. The only problem is in the real world, it doesn't always work that way. Hence, the backup, impartial, independent observer. That backup is supposed to be the NED. So that's a very good point. All right, keep going.
Independence. Director independence is critical to effective corporate governance, and providing objective, independent judgment that represents the interests of all shareholders is at the core of the board's oversight function. Accordingly, a substantial majority of the board's directors should be independent, according to the applicable rules and regulations, and as determined by the board. Definition of independence. An independent director should not have any relationships that may impair or appear to impair the director's ability to exercise independent judgment. Many boards have developed their own standards for assessing independence under stock market definitions, in addition to considering the views of institutional investors and other relevant groups.
In other words, now you're going to start getting some information on what constitutes independence. So what are the characteristics? So far, we've been saying board members need to be independent, auditors need to be independent, NEDs need to be independent. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty.
So this
What?
goes to conflict of interest, right?
Of course, of course, that dirty word. My. So now you guys are beginning to bring the pieces together. And that's the whole idea. And this is what makes this whole thing so crucial, so important to be known at all levels. So that when stuff comes up, all of you and those who you impact somehow and inform somehow will be able to cope better with the situation. All right, keep going. Let's see what happens.
Assessing independence. When evaluating a director's independence, the board should consider all relevant facts and circumstances, focusing on whether the director has any relationship, either direct or indirect, with the company, senior management, or other directors that could affect actual or perceived independence. This includes relationships with other companies that have significant business relationships with the company, or with not-for-profit organizations that receive substantial support from the company. While it has been suggested that long-standing board service may be perceived to affect director independence, long tenure by itself should not disqualify a director from being considered independent.
Now, folks, I don't know what you've been thinking while she was reading this, but continue to think very carefully. If you are a board member, if you are thinking about becoming a board member, if you're in any discussions about board members, this issue of independence, as you can now see, is crucial. Once you sit on the board, you have to be careful what relationships you are involved with. You cannot be seen as a board member to be hanging out with the competition. Does anybody get that?
Yes, sir.
My. You may not be doing anything wrong, but you cannot be seen to be hanging with them because the perception will be, right or wrong, that your independence can be impaired, which is true. If your company is involved with a charity or any other kind of activity, you cannot be sitting necessarily on that board as well. Because if you're straddling the board fence, how can you maintain your independence? If you bring a family member on the board, how can they be independent if you are related to them? Because we all know it's hard to be independent when making decisions about members, people who are friends, and especially people who are our relatives, even when they are flicking wrong. It's still hard to make a decision. So we have to be careful what we engage in that could impair or affect our level of independence at the board level first, and any level where independence is expected to be exercised. When auditors come in, they can't be too buddy with the senior management. They can maintain a professional relationship, but that buddy thing has to go. They can't go out and watch Dragon and the Dragoness dancing, having fun, flying on the private jet all over the place to Waikiki, watching dancing girls together. They can't be doing that because that crap has a tendency to impair our professional and independent judgment. So when you find something wrong now, you have to report on the same people you're having fun with? All right. That's what we mean in practice. She just read about it on the paper. The paper doesn't talk about all the little itsy bitsies. But that's what we mean by assessing independence. Be careful. If you are supposed to be independent, don't find yourself in any compromising situations that could impair or are perceived to impair. Okay, Jeffries, keep going. Election.
Directors should be elected by a majority vote for terms that are consistent with long-term value creation. Board should adopt a resignation policy under which a director who does not receive a majority vote tenders his or her resignation to the board for its consideration. Although the ultimate decision whether to accept or reject the resignation will rest with the board and its Nominating Corporate Governance Committee should think critically about the reasons why the director did not receive a majority vote and whether or not the director should continue to serve. Among other things, this way you was talking about what happened in the public this week, Mr. Wilkinson,
Yes.
with Belinda Wilson.
Interesting that you are now able to make that connection because well, maybe there's some of your colleagues who don't really know. Can you just
She
give
was
them?
voted back in. Okay, so Belinda Wilson is the president for BUT the Teachers Union, and
Yeah.
she voted back in. I think she won 13, or they won 13 out of the 15 seats,
Yeah,
whoever her team was. So she was voted back in as president.
indeed. Much to the chagrin of some other people, but that was the decision that was taken, and she is now president again. For those of you who may not know, there was a time in the past when there was a lot of controversy because if you know anything about Belinda Wilson, she is no doggone,
Biggity.
yeah, Yeah, in Bahamianese, biggity. She is no deep freeze. Belinda does not keep anything. She will let it rip for better or for worse, even for her own betterment. If she thinks it's good or whatever, she's gonna let it rip. If it's her opinion, she's gonna let it rip. You don't like it. That's how Belinda is. That is not only how she is at the board level, but that is one of her characteristics as a person, for better or for worse. Belinda has been that way from she was a student in high school, always arguing some point and arguing loud too. And if you didn't like it, too bad. That was Belinda. You either like her as she is or not. She was not about to change it in high school, and she hasn't changed anything yet. She is still the same Belinda, making her point for better or for worse. Absolutely. Interesting and good connection. All right, keep going.
Its nominating corporate governance committee should think critically about what the reasons why the director did not receive a majority vote and whether or not the director should continue to serve. Among other things, they should consider whether the vote resulted from concerns about a policy issue affecting the board as a whole or concerns specific to the individual director and the basis for those concerns.
In other words, if the board decides to vote out a member, the nominating committee's job kicks in again because they have to determine the reason for not keeping this board member, were they legitimate or not? Because it's not enough just to vote somebody out because they were independent or they didn't go with every single decision you make, even though oftentimes that is the reason. Again, the nominating committee's job, crucial, has to be to question the board's decision, not to vote for that person. Why did you not vote for them? And an appropriate explanation should be given. If they cannot get an appropriate explanation, then the committee knows that there's a problem on that board. And what they do next becomes absolutely critical. Okay? So welcome to the real, and again, all these things together and individually are part of the governance process. And how we management determines whether our governance is good or bad corporate governance. All these little itsy bitsy things, from the little fire in the boardroom, the little flame, all the way to what's happening on an international level when Russia decides to invade Ukraine. See? The hell kind of governance is that? Killing innocent people because you want the territory back? Man, we're supposed to be more civilized than that now. This is the 21st century. The Ukraine has long been a sovereign country, just like the Bahamas. Just like another country deciding, Cuba, for example, deciding they're going to invade the Bahamas. How about that? Anybody ever thought about that? Hopefully they're not, but it's the same principle. They have 11, 12 million people. How many people do we have? Anyone?
400.
400,000. What the hell can we do? If Uncle Sam doesn't kick in, dog eat our lunch. See, that's another governance thing that we don't maybe even think about. But then again, when those of us sitting on the country board, that's a strategic thing. It may never happen. It should never happen. But the Ukrainians didn't think would happen to them either. Yet here they are losing innocent men and women and children, being murdered just for the hell of it, and thrown into mass graves because Tom Jones decided that he is going to practice poor governance at an international country level. Oh, darn it. Okay, let's get down to a normal board again. Okay, keep going.
Time commitments. Serving as a director of a public company requires significant time and attention. Certain roles, such as committee chair, board chair, and lead director, carry an additional time commitment beyond that of board and committee service. Directors must spend the time needed and meet as frequently as necessary to discharge their responsibilities properly. While there may not be a need for a set limit on the number of outside boards on which a director or committee member may serve, or for any limits on other activities a director may pursue outside of his or her board duties, each director should be committed to the responsibilities of board service. and each board should monitor the time constraints of its members in light of their particular circumstances.
Interesting. Not all board members show up to all the meetings they should. Not all board members participate in the processes they should. Not all boards call as frequent meetings as they should. See, all of these things represent what? Bad governance practices, whether you were aware of it or not. That's why we get into this little nitty-gritty thing, because this thing about corporate governance is not just looking at the surface of what is required, but getting into the nitty-gritty of the things that really impact the proper operation of the board so that its governance practices are suitable and acceptable. And notice, right down to just time commitment. Does every board member commit to the time? Does every board member show up for the meetings? Does the board, in fact, have enough meetings per year to satisfy their governance requirements? The answer is not always. And most of you may not even be aware of that. Interesting little fact, time commitment. All right, because sometimes when we're discussing it at a broader level, at an international level, at a national level, we don't hear about these little details, like conflict of interest issues between senior management, conflict between senior management and boards and so on. We don't hear these little details. But in fact, these are oftentimes the thing, time commitments, board commitments, sufficient board meeting. But these are oftentimes the things that create all the poor governance issues. But we don't hear anything until we hear boom, an explosion. And then we're all trying to figure out what was the source of that explosion for that entity. And oftentimes it's because of these little things that we don't pay attention to or we're not even aware of. Okay, keep going, Jeffries.
Board leadership approaches. U.S. companies take a variety of approaches to board leadership. Some combine the positions of CEO and chair, while others appoint a separate chair. No one leadership structure is right for every company at all times, and different boards may reach different conclusions about the leadership structures that are most appropriate at any particular point in time. When appropriate in light of its current and anticipated circumstances, a board should assess which leadership structure is appropriate. Lead, presiding director. Independent board leadership is critical to effective corporate governance, regardless of the board's leadership structure. Accordingly, the board should appoint a lead director, also referred to as a presiding director, if it combines the positions of CEO and chair or has a chair who is not independent. The lead director should be appointed by the independent directors and should serve for a term determined by the independent directors. Lead directors perform a range of functions depending on the board's needs, but they typically chair executive sessions of a board's independent or non-management directors, have the authority to call executive sessions and oversee follow-up on matters discussed in executive sessions. Other key functions of the lead director include chairing board meetings in the absence of a board chair, reviewing and or approving agendas and schedules for board meetings and information sent to the board, and being available for engagement with long-term shareholders.
Thank you so much, Jeffries, for that, all of that stuff. Suffice it to say, you've said a mouthful, as we have seen. There are so many bits and pieces involved in the whole process of the board's activities and senior management, as you've seen, and all of these together and individually set the stage to determine whether corporate governance in that particular firm is going to be good or bad, successful or unsuccessful. Okay? You'll notice she said, coming down to the end, that the chairman of the board should be separate from the CEO, clearly, for obvious reasons. That creates the independence that the board needs. We don't want the CEO acting as chairman of any board. That means he's leading the board and leading the day-to-day operation. That kills any semblance of independence and the problems there are inherently clear if you really think about them. This lead or presiding director, that is a kind of assistant chairman, you might say. Some persons call them lead director, some call them assistant chairman. They're the persons who kick in when the chairman is not presiding for whatever reason, and they have much of the same powers to lead the board's activities as does the chairman of the board. But there's no doubt, as you can see, that so many individual factors have to be combined at the board and senior management level if our firms are going to be run correctly. And hopefully so far, between last week and now, you've seen a whole lot of things for you to think about. Even if you're not sitting on a board, you might eventually end up on a board. And if you are that person that we tend to call just an employee, there's no such thing. This information is vital to all stakeholders within the firm. Okay? We're just focusing at the moment on senior management and board level persons. And certainly we've seen that the shareholders have an inherent interest in this whole process, even if they are minority shareholders, they too have a voice. And we've seen some of the many other stakeholders that are out there, and we will see their names coming up again as we go forward in one form or another. All right, so we're gonna stop there. Next week we'll pick it up. For those of you who have not read the rest of Guiding Principles, please go ahead and do so. Remember, if you get up in the middle of the night screaming from a bad dream and you cannot sleep, just go ahead and read the rest of that for next week, and then jump right into the CBOB corporate governance requirements, because next week we're going to complete our discussion on the Guiding Principles, and then we'll jump into the central bank's requirements, primarily because they are very specific to financial institutions and they involve a whole lot of the guiding principles that we discussed today, along with its own special remedies for good corporate governance. All right, so have a great reading week coming up, and I shall see you guys next week, Saturday at the same time. Remember also, if you are reading and you have any points of interest that you want to raise, please make a note so that when we come next week, you can raise them with your colleagues. Remember, in this session, there's no such thing as a silly question, and everything you say might be of benefit to somebody sitting in your class. Okay? Any questions before we break?
No, sir.
Wonderful. Again, if you have any other issues along the way, send me an email. Do not hesitate. I'm always checking my email. I'll be happy to respond. All right. Have a great and safe week, and I'll see you guys next week.
Good day.
You too, sir. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Take care.